Hi again, welcome to part 2 of this video set of how to make an image gallery. So in the first image gallery we've got our images, we've loaded them into the page, now they're displaying one after the other on the web page. Ultimately that's not what we want long term, but they are displaying, and that is something. So in the first video we've loaded them in there. What we do want is a container underneath these images, because ultimately those 4 images are long term going to line up in one row across the top and be much smaller, and we want a container underneath which is going to display the bigger image once it loads, or once it is selected by the end user, should I say. So we're going to create an empty div, and we're going to call that container. And again, if you have a class called, or an ID called container already in your file, you're going to want to call this one something different. Okay, so div class container, and within that we are going to put in another on-click event. This dot parent element dot style dot display, none. I've slightly done that wrong. Okay. Plus I'm having nightmare typing today, and times. Right, what this is basically a big X. Okay, so what this is basically saying is when you select one of the images, we're going to have a button with a type that should be close BTM, not and it's going to display as an X on your image. It's going to be in the top right hand corner, and basically what it allows you to do is to close the image down, okay, or make it disappear. Okay, so where it says this.parent element, so the parent element will be the image, it will display on the image and the user will be able to select it and it will close the image. Okay, we're going to have img id equals expanded img width equals 100%. Oh, it's not liking me there. That's because I've not started with the speech mark, so that's not what I wanted. Right. Create another div, and we'll this time call it id equals img text. We'll close that div. So it's an empty div right now, but later on we have the option to actually do something with it if we need to. So that right now is all of the now that's it's complaining about out attribute. I mean the out attribute is up here, so hopefully that would be carried through into where we use it. So I wouldn't worry too much. It's one of the nice things about Dreamweaver is it does give you these prompts. An out attribute, it says it must be present on ing elements. Well, that's not quite true. I mean, it is a suggestion. It's good, very good practice to have an out tag there, but it's not 100% necessary with that. So, okay, so I think it's time to add the CSS in there. So we haven't made the CSS yet, and there's a lot of CSS to add. So we will now make the CSS. So we'll go File, New, and we'll create the CSS by clicking CSS in the new document. And then we'll create a new file, and obviously we will call that gallery, because that's what we're pointing to. So we want it to call the same thing, otherwise it's not going to find it. So now we have a file, gallery.css here, and we've actually made the gallery.css, and now we need to fill it with what we need to. So remember, the CSS is what we use to make web pages present nicely, and there is quite a bit of CSS to go in here. So hopefully you will stay with me with this. Feel free to stop the video if you need to just take the text down. So first thing I'm going to do, a star basically means it applies to the whole document. Box sizing, and we're going to make a border box. Border box. Body. So remember, for CSS you need these semicolons after every line. Font family. In my practice one, I used Arial, but you know what? Let's go for this one. It shouldn't be too much. You've only got a couple of lines of text, and then we're going to call the column, and I'm going to float it left. Remember, we want each column to be taking up a similar proportion of the web page. So if you have 4 images in this example, you're going to want to use a number which is equal, okay? And of course that number will be therefore 100 divided by, so 100% divided by 4, which brings us to 25%. And you'll see later on how all you need to do is change that one number, and you will be able to have more images on there, but you will need to do a bit of math to work out exactly what that percentage will be, but it's not hard really. And I'm going to add some padding, because otherwise what will happen is the images will be right next to each other and there won't be a gap between them. So you may want to try it with less or more padding. It's entirely up to you. But I've got 10 pixels there, which gives us a little bit of space. And what we can also do here is add in, this is column width. Okay. So this is a comment. Now you can choose to put more comments in as we go through, if it helps you to remember what everything does. Okay, so the commenting system is a little bit different between CSS and HTML in terms of in HTML, if you want to make a comment, you would use 2 backslashes like that. We should, but that doesn't seem to be working. Ironic. Anyway, it's not important right now. Dot column img. So we're going to refer to any tag that has an img. Any img tag that is within the column div. And remember, there's 4 of them in this instance. So what I want to do is just bring down the opacity. So the opacity is almost how transparent something is. So we're going to bring it down, make it look a little bit lighter than what it really is, I guess the impact of that will be. And we're going to just change the cursor of what the person looks at to be pointers, because we want them to point at something. And again, you guys can have a play about with all this stuff. You don't have to. You may want to try exactly what I'm doing to begin with, but afterwards, try having a fiddle about with the width, the padding, the opacity, by all means, because ultimately that's how you really kind of get to know this stuff. What we also want to do is add in a row after. So remember, we're going to have a button that allows the end user to close the image. So what we want to do is to actually, and for any content that comes after this row, we're going to want to close and get rid of the formatting. So we don't want necessarily the float left to be impacting on that. So content is going to be nothing. Sorry, I was just trying to read my handwriting there, because obviously I've got this all written down because I've had practice with it previously, and I couldn't actually read it there, which always a frustrating thing as a web developer. Anyway, so dot container. So when we talk about relative position, it is basically relative to the flow of the document, and it obviously will display after the previous one and display none. And I spelt container wrong. A real fail with that. There we are, container. I'm going to put in a few character terms here just to make this go up the page. This isn't going to have, white space doesn't have any impact here, so you don't need to worry about putting the carriage returns in. I'm only putting them in there so it goes further up your page, so hopefully it makes it easier for you to see. Image, text. So remember, this is the X that we spoke about. We want it to be absolute position, so I want it to be in a very specific place all the time. Okay, so like I said, we're putting it in a very specific position on the image. We're making the color of it white. We're giving it a font size of 20 points. Okay, so again, you can have a fiddle about with all of those if you want it to look different. It may well be that something with a font size of white on your page will look rather silly, or maybe your picture is mostly white, in which case you want to have a bit of play about with them. Dot close btn. Sorry, I've got them the wrong way around. This is the button. It's been a long day already, because this is going to be top right. Yeah, this is the button. I've got them the wrong way around. Oops. Second time I've done that. Right. So again, you've got very similar code there, but you've also got this extra cursor pointer there, just so it knows that it's pointing at something, and we'll click it. It'll be able to click it. So if we save this right now, and this is where I've written all that code, and it's not going to work on me. But let's try and run it. So basically, what we should find is that our 4 images line up across the top of the page. That's what we're hoping for, and they've completely disappeared. Well, that's not great at all. Right, I don't necessarily mind you guys seeing that I made an error there. So basically, I had a look and compared it with my previous code that I did, and the bits that I've highlighted here are the ones where I made the error. And I don't exactly know why it's completely didn't work the first time around, but you can see we've got column img, and now we've got column img and then hover. So the hover is where you're going to have your mouse over the image, and the impact of that is that you can see now I've got all of my images working, and when you hover over them, it actually makes quite a nice visual impact. Okay, but when you click on these as yet, it doesn't do anything. Now, obviously, at the minute, that doesn't include the JavaScript. So if we go back to the very first example of what we did, so actually the images are a little smaller in here because it goes in percentages. You can see that when oh yeah, because I've deleted them. I'm going absolutely mad. So when you're testing this, you basically go through it and delete and add bits in, and I've deleted a bit in here, and I'll need to re-add it in later on. I had a bit of a nightmare there. Anyway, I'm going to pause here before we add the last little bit in here, which will be a little bit of JavaScript to make it so that when we click on the image, it will display underneath it. So, this is, just in case you need to pause this code just to check what you've got. This is the current HTML code, so you can pause that if you need to, and this is line 1 to 37, so you can pause that if you need to, and then from 37 downwards. And remember, you don't need all of these bits of code at the bottom. So we'll finish off this image gallery in the next video, and I'll look forward to seeing you then.